Do you feel that at school people told you what to learn but not how to learn? It is kind of interesting because most of the time we forget what we've learned in the past, but we remember the skills we get to move forward. So today's video is about how I can give you some tips on how to learn so that you can remember a bit more, but most of it you can learn the skills that you need so that you can learn anything you need in the future. Welcome to my channel. My name is Alain Faber and I'm a high school teacher, and on this video I'm going to share with you some tricks on how to remember what you learn and also tricks on how to get the skills and transfer those skills to other areas of our lives. Because in many ways, when we learn how to learn, it is a lifelong skill that will be useful for you to keep your growth mindset and go to the next level, and ideally to make the world a better place. So tell me, what are the best way for you to learn? I remember when I was younger, my father was a carpenter, and I remember doing cabinets with him. I remember doing all kind of things with him for the work he was doing, but also around the house. And guess what? I was learning by doing. I was not sitting passively noticing what he was doing. I was actually doing it. And that's the idea of apprenticeship, where you are learning from someone who's done it before. When I went to university, I remember that I was going to classes and I was sitting there, and all I could say it was, you know, I'm learning all these things and it's very hard for me to remember. And I couldn't figure out how people could actually sit all day learning and be able to do something with that knowledge later on. And that's why I appreciated the lab portion of the university work. And as a geologist, that was the greatest job for me, because as a geologist, you're doing mapping, you're going out there to gather data. You are meeting with people with what they know, and you're sharing with others what you know as well. And the idea is, when you are doing the work, when you're actually trying to do it, you succeed, you fail, you learn from failures. And what happens is you become better at your trade. And in many ways, the way I learn best is by experimenting and doing. And that's a bit why I have this YouTube channel. I figured that improving my English speaking skill, I needed to speak more. I do love sharing what I know, so this is a great medium for me to do so. But in many ways, someone was mentioning, well, we do at school learn a lot of things, but we don't always learn how to do it. And that's why I thought this video would be amazing. As a teacher, that interesting thing is that I love teaching science. And the reason for that is because I can learn the topics, but we can also experiment. We can have questions and try to figure out what prior scientists have done to get answers, but also have new questions so that we can ourselves experiment, have a hypothesis, gather the materials, and then think about how we could gather the data so we can answer questions. And the amazing thing about doing labs is that you analyze your own data. Now, there's a lot of scientists that say, well, the internet is full of information and therefore I can do research on data already available. And that is amazing, because you know what? There's so much data out there that is available that often we don't have enough brain power or computer space to actually do calculations and come up with analysis. And the idea here is, how can you make the best of the data? Some people are researchers in university, they are inventors at home, they are improving inventions in college. And the idea is, how can you experiment to make what you do better? And this is how I believe we're learning. We will learn by doing. As little kids, you learn by actually doing it. When you want to walk, you don't watch TV to learn how to walk. You need to get up, fall, and get up and be resilient in learning. And that's what growth mindset brings forward for us. Because by trying, we actually can get better, because we can answer questions. I was reading a book on mindset, And they were talking about how some people love to have a puzzle and do the same puzzle over and over again because it's easy for them and they feel they've achieved a level where they are proficient. On the other hand, there's a few people who, with a growth mindset, who will have a puzzle, will do a second time, and after that they say, okay, well, I need something more challenging. And that's when you go from a 10-piece puzzle when you're very young to a 20 to 100 to 1,000-piece puzzle. This is amazing because the challenge gets bigger and you're learning from it. So I have 4 tips for you on how to actually learn better and know how to learn. So there's 4 tips to help you. Some are realizing that you can learn. Some others, they're tips on ways you can try to learn. So my first tip is about realizing that if you want to learn something, to realize that others have learned it before. So if someone was able to learn it before, that means you can too. Now, online, we see people that can learn and do things in minutes, in a few hours, or in a few years. Other people may take 10 years. But the idea here is not to look at a timeline to do something, but to realize that if you take the time and you decide to learn something, that is the first step, because then you can find ways to learn. Some of you may take more time than others, and that's okay. Look at the English language. I started learning English 40 years ago. My English is pretty good. Could it be better? Yes, I do enjoy. I was listening to speeches from the United States election campaigns. And you know what? Amazing speakers. And I strive to be better this way. I know I can. It just takes longer for me to do so. My second tip is about having to experiment on how to be better. In science, we do experiments all the time, but in most fields, we can do the same as well. For example, if you are in marketing, you will create posters and copywriting emails. Now, you can learn about how to do them, but doing it will give you the opportunity to say, okay, I've tried this, it works, and I've tried that, and it doesn't work. Experience is priceless because this is something you can learn and eventually be able to help others. In geology, if you want to do exploration geology, you have to be going in the field to actually collect the data and see how it is. That's the only way you can get better. Other examples, in business, if you think of a business and you say, well, I'd like to have one, well, start. Some people will have a lemonade stand on the side of the road. They'll have a garage sale that they sell things. Sometimes they will go to garage sale to buy, to sell in their own garage sales. This is the beginning of business. You have to practice. Then you can read what the clients want. You can read the customers. And then you increase and improve your knowledge base. So experimenting is the key here. I had a few examples. If you want to be an architect, well, play with Legos and try to build things. It may not be the best one at the beginning, but guess what? The more you do it, the better you will get as well. And that's why when we are kids, we play. The purpose of playing is to experiment and succeed and fail in what we're trying to do. The more we succeed, we tend to enjoy more and more of that. The more we fail, well, if there are major fails, we won't want to do it again. But if there are little fails and they help you build your knowledge, you'll notice that experimenting is very rewarding. And that's why kids feel rewarded by playing. And that's why adults need to play with kids. It does 2 things. Kids feel that they are recognized for what they do. And second, it's good for you to go back when you were kids and playing, because when you learn playing again, you'll notice life is more exciting. My third tip will be several ways on how to memorize or learn knowledge. I have a lot of difficulties. I say often that it's hard for me to memorize information. And I've had that difficulties for a long time. I have a friend who will read something will read a textbook, will read something, and they will remember it right away. They will know it 5 years down the road. I have a lot of respect for people who can do it. On my part, there's a lot of things I had to do to try to memorize, and you know what, there's still a lot I need to. That's why science is quite a nice way, because I can always go back to the basic knowledge. I can always redo an experiment to try to confirm what I know. So the first one, so here are some of the tips some of the ways I've learned to memorize better. The first one is taking my own notes. That means that notes and renote, there you go. So if you go to a class or you go somewhere, you will write down what you are learning. And then at the end of the day, you are rewriting it to make sure that you understand better. I'll give you an example. A few years back, I went to see Tony Robbins, and that's the book he was giving us. And I remember writing all along the experiment, all around the get-together. And what I did is I rewrote the information. That was one way for me to remember what was being said. And you know what? I always write different things. I continuously write this way. And so this book is full of notes, and I have tens and tens of these here. I have a lot of them because when I listen to a lesson, I understand better when I can write notes as I learn. And that's why in my class, I like to give handouts, and I can give situation in graphs and space to write notes, because students that are visual can see what I'm trying to say. People that learn better by listening, they can listen to what I have to say. And sometimes I have links on the net so they can read or read in a textbook. So they try to, and then they can experiment on top of that. And it's all the idea of taking notes and rewriting notes, and it's a good way for you to do so. I know that a trick you can do is you can take a page and you can have a column for 2/3 on one side and 1/3 after. The 1/3 here, so the 1/3 is the notes, and here that as you go along your class, and the 1/3 here is for you to put insight from or questions you had. You can doodle as well. The idea is when you reread your notes and you put a link of the doodles and the drawings and the question, it's a good way for your brain to reconnect the brain cells to say, oh yes, I remember better. And that's a good way. Another way to remember is to use teams for notes. When I was in university, I remember that I had friends, and what they were doing, there were 5 of them. And for the 5 of them, there was one person every day taking notes. So that means that on Monday, one person was taking notes, the other 4 were paying attention to what was happening in class. So what happened is a couple days after, someone would give them the notes from the first day. And on the second day, the second person would take notes, and the other 4 were listening. The beauty of that is that it's very hard sometimes to take notes and listen. I can do it. It's easy for me, but for others, it's harder. So by having someone focusing on notes, the others did not have to worry about it. They knew notes were coming, and they could focus on what was happening in class. And what happened is at the end of the week, they had all the notes that each other have written to each other, and they could add from what they had gotten from the class. Now, nowadays in 2020, you can bring a voice recorder and you can record classes with permission, in which case that's even another way for you to add to your notes what you may have missed. Another way, keep the margin, cue cards. Some people love cue cards. So for example, when I record a video, I have my first 3 lines, ideas and stories, and on the other side, I put the tips I want to give and my call to action. My call to action is here. And the beauty of that gives me a chance to organize my ideas. It gives me a chance to keep it together. So these are the big cue cards. To study for a test, some people use cue cards too, because for example, they would get a cue cards for each of the concept. So what they would do is they would have maybe 150 cue cards at the end of a semester or at the end of a course, and they will go through the cards. And when they knew the topics, they would take the card away. So as they would go through, the piles would get smaller and smaller because the concepts that were easily understood, the cue cards were stepped aside, and the concepts that were harder for them to remember, they could review them over and over and over again up to the time when the cue cards would be over, and when they took all of the package the night before the exam or a big deadline, they could do it. So the cue cards helped quite nicely. And what is interesting, you can also use PowerPoints and also other visuals to help you. Because if you use a slide for a PowerPoint, in some ways they're huge cue cards. People don't realize that, but when I plan for my course and I use a PowerPoint or a Google presentation, the purpose for that is to give the audience a chance to see what we're talking about, but for the most part is to help me remember what I have to talk about. So use your PowerPoints and your Google presentation or other type of visual you're using in presentations as huge cue cards. You'll see, that's a great way to do it. Another example is to use the information. When we do a lab in science, something that I show a lot is the inquiry process. And the inquiry process is the same on week 1 than in week 20. And if they're in grade 9 and they continue with me in grade 10, it's the same thing on week 1 in grade 10, so grade 21 compared to week 40. The inquiry process is something we can learn, but it's something we can use. And if you can use the knowledge, if you can use what you're learning, and then you can apply it, that's the best way on how to remember it. And that's why repetition is very important here. Another example is indeed practicing. If you really want to learn something, if you really want to get good at something, you need to repeat, you need to practice and do it over and over again. If you think of a pilot, airplane pilot, they just don't go in a plane and start flying. They use simulators, they use different planes, they practice taking off and landing over and over again. And the more they fly, the better they get. Same thing with a golfer. The amazing thing with being a golfer is the more you play, the better you get. And the better you get, and the more you go to tournaments, the more just by doing, you're practicing your skills. Same thing with a speaker. If you are an expert in your field, the fact that you're helping others gives you a chance to experiment, gives you a chance to practice even more so that you're becoming better at your trade. By recording videos for YouTube, I practice. Are my videos always excellent? No. Are they getting better? Yes. Are there ups and downs in how I do them? Yes, indeed. However, the more I practice, the more I feel more confident, and the better it gets. And let's see this. Perfect. And these are tips on how to remember, how to study, how to make sure that you get better at your trade. And my fourth tip is the following. Do not compare yourself right now to another person, but try to compare. You can look at where you are in the journey of another person. I pay attention to Evan Carmichael, so that's his book here, Year One Word, and I try to be better on posting information and content related to growth mindset. I can compare myself to him right now, but he's got 2 million subscribers. More than 2 million. He's given talk to a lot of people all around the world. So what happens is I cannot compare myself right now to him right now. On the other hand, I can use his knowledge from his journey, how he was when he started compared to how I am right now, so that I can build confidence saying, okay, this is what he's done to get better. I can do something similar. If I started to compare myself to someone who is an expert speaker, someone who is a YouTuber that has millions of subscribers, it will be very hard for me to have the self-esteem to be able to move on. And the reason is the step is so high, is for me to go from here to much higher is much more difficult. On the other hand, if I learn from their journey, I can put myself with them in their journey, knowing that if they were able to achieve something, I should be able to achieve it as well. So the idea is not the knowledge of where they are at right now, but it's understanding their journey. And this is important because if you want to know how to learn, if you want to learn how to do something, look at the journey of somebody to be able to get there. That's why biographies are a great way for you to learn from someone. You learn from their journey so you can apply their learning to your own journey. And this is great ways on how to learn so that you can go to the next step. My call to action today is the following. So my note here is, let's see. Okay. I'm gonna read what I have here. So I want you to reflect on what you've done this week. I want you to think about what you've been able to learn in the last year, the last 5 years. Sit down and try to say, okay, where was I 5 years ago related to the project I'm doing right now? 5 years ago, I had no YouTube channels. I was teaching in my classroom. I was not worried about what was going on too much in the world because I was focusing on my day-to-day life. I was creating content in my class. Now, think of the growth mindset that happened when you realize, well, me compared to what I did yesterday, there's not much changes. There's not much that has changed. On the other hand, if I compare myself today from 5 years ago, it's day and night. So much has changed, and I'm very proud of what I've done so far. The other one is, once you realize that you've done a lot so far, I want you to think that what's best for you is to appreciate and celebrate all the things you've learned so far. Think of a person that is in grade 10 compared to when they were in grade 5. Someone who's graduating from college to 5 years before we were still in high school. Think of someone who is a senior manager in a company, and 5 years prior, where were they? A CEO, if you have your own company, how are you today compared to 5 years ago? We have all grown because we all have a growth mindset. I believe in you to make the world a better place. I'm going to put here a link to my best life journey for all the videos that I'm creating to make sure that you learn what's best to make the world a better place. I'll see you in the next video.